Arsenal and Sporting today in the first leg of the Champions League quarterfinal draw off the heels of an FA Cup exit, an early FA Cup exit, I should add, for the Gunners. It is a worrying time at Arsenal, having gone from quadruple hopes to double hopes, or maybe just trophy hopes at all this season within a matter of a few weeks. So it is a little bit worrying. It is a little bit anxiety ridden, but the focus is clear now. Win the league and win the Champions League, or progress as far as possible in the Champions League. It's still very much going to be a successful season if those things happen. But we've got a match to talk about today. Arsenal travel to Portugal for the first leg against Sporting Lisbon. We're going to be previewing the match, talking about that early FA Cup loss to Southampton, and talking about the outlook of Arsenal's season the rest of the run-in. This is the American Gooner. It's a tale of two seasons for Arsenal. If you look at the last three and a half weeks, we go from quadruple hopes 3 weeks ago, being in the Carabao Cup final, FA Cup quarterfinal, 9 points clear at the top of the Premier League table, and through to the quarterfinal of the UEFA Champions League. All signs at that point were pointing to 2, maybe 3 guaranteed trophies for Arsenal. And of course, there were lots of rumblings about a potential quadruple. And here we are, 2 matches removed from those discussions, which is what I believe makes this sting that much more, that it took just 2 matches to knock us out of 2 of those competitions. But now we're talking about maybe Arsenal will only win 1 or none of those trophies this season. The pressure is being put on from Man City, who looked flawless, dominant against Liverpool on Saturday, and obviously defeated us in the League Cup final at Wembley. If you're talking about the psychological and mental title race, they have the edge right now. Man City, they absolutely have the edge right now. The next few weeks are going to be very telling before the 2 sides meet at the Etihad for the second time in a month. But as of right now, Arsenal in a bit of a figurative free fall. I don't want to say that the total outlook is shattered, because going into that League Cup final, things were looking so positive, and we haven't played in the Premier League or in the Champions League since then. So I can't say that things in those 2 competitions have totally been flipped upside down for Arsenal, but I think the feeling, at least from the support and the feeling within the room and from Arteta, is that back-to-back cup competitions that you were favored to go and win, back-to-back kind of shocking performances, and back-to-back losses, has everybody around Arsenal feeling right now like, oh shit, this whole season, this whole idea of going to win a quadruple, or going to win 3 trophies, or winning the Premier League for the first time in 22 years, or going back to a Champions League semifinal like we were in last year, and potentially progressing even further. The ideas of all of that, and the hopes and the aspirations to go and actually achieve it, that all might be crumbling as we speak. The one thing I'll say about that, and granted, I fully was a believer in all of those ideas, that Arsenal should have beaten Man City at Wembley, should have easily gone past Southampton this past weekend, probably gone on at least to another FA Cup final at Wembley, if not gone on to lift the trophy. And I'm still a believer that Arsenal can win the Premier League and can win the Champions League. But I was a believer that all four of those things could have been true at the same time, although it's seeming to be a very far-fetched and delusional idea as we sit here now, just 2 matches later. And that's, our dreams have been quite literally cut in half. But I will say that I think there's so much more pressure on this team now because the talks of the quadruple were just so strong and so present everywhere you looked. Everybody all season long were talking about how it was somewhat inevitable that Arsenal would win 2, if not 3 trophies this season. And I'm not trying to sit here and be an armchair pundit after being eliminated from 2 of those competitions and say that it was an unfair expectation to have. But I think it was. I think it was one thing for Arsenal fans to be believing that the quadruple could happen or that the treble could happen because we have high hopes and high expectations for this team. The way that they had played pretty much up until last weekend, they hadn't lost 2 matches in a row. They hadn't lost in any competition outside of the Premier League. They'd only lost 3 Premier League matches from August up until now. And it just seemed like their depth was untouchable in terms of dealing with injuries, dealing with poor performance, dips in form, or just bouncing back from those 3 losses that they'd had in the Prem. It seems like no matter what, this team was somewhat inevitable. So for Arsenal supporters to be truly believing that we could go and win a treble or like maybe even make history and win a quadruple, I don't think that that's crazy. I don't think that that's unfair. Every supporter of every club wants that to be the reality for their team. You want to believe and you want to see your team win as much as possible. So I don't think it's crazy that Arsenal fans, when you saw the form that they were in, when you saw the positions they put themselves in each of the 4 competitions, when you saw the luck of the draw when it came to the FA Cup, when it came to the Carabao Cup, add in the fact that everybody was starting to talk about the likelihood of a treble or of a quadruple. It's not crazy for Arsenal fans to have wanted that, to have thought that maybe it could happen, to be rooting for that, to be expecting that. That part to me isn't crazy. What I think is unfair is that it feels the quadruple narrative was created, and if it wasn't created by, then it was most definitely amplified by the media and opposition supporters. Now that it's no longer a possibility and Arsenal have been eliminated from 2 of the 4 competitions where they potentially could have gone on to win trophies, it seems like the same people that were fueling that quadruple narrative and talking about the likelihood of it are using it against Arsenal, that they didn't go on and do something that no other club has done. You can't fault them for not doing something that is historically almost impossible. Whether or not they were favored to do it, whether or not everybody in the media said that they would or not, you can't create the narrative that they are going to do something that's never been done before. They don't go and do it. And now you are criticizing them for not having gone and done that thing that nobody else has done. And I'm not trying to say that Arsenal fans weren't very outspoken about our belief that they could win a quadruple. But it's not crazy to support your club and think that they might have a chance to go and win 4 trophies when they were favored in each of the 4 competitions. What's crazy to me is saying that this is a team that could win 4 trophies in 1 year, something that the best sides of this and last century were not able to achieve. This team might be able to achieve it. Then, when they don't do something that the best teams in European football history were not able to do, criticizing them for not having won 4 trophies. And what I hate the most is that the term bottlers is getting thrown around again. And I feel like it's a term that has lost all meaning. When Arsenal were leading the league by 8 points or whatever it was with like 5 matches left in 2023, and then they ended up losing it on the last day to Man City, yes, that's a bottle. And people are saying, oh, well, they were favored in each of the 4 competitions, so theoretically they were in the lead to win each of the 4 trophies, and they failed in 2 of those competitions, so therefore they bottled their opportunity to win those trophies. While true that they were favored in all 4 of the competitions, the likelihood that they would win all 4 in one season was 5%. It works the same way a parlay does in sports betting. You could pick all of the favorites in given matches to win, but for all of those things to happen at the same time is nearly impossible. And that's why the odds get slimmer and slimmer the more things you say are going to happen. So the fact that Arsenal weren't able to do something that none of the best teams in European football history were ever able to do, and that they had a 5% chance of actually going and doing, is not bottling. Now, here's where things are a little bit concerning about the last 2 matches. You threw away your 2 easiest chances at winning a trophy this year, and that's why the outlook is so gloomy for Arsenal going forward, because your hopes of winning a trophy are contingent on the 2 strongest competitions you play in and the 2 hardest to actually succeed in. Does it help that they have a 9-point cushion at the top of the Premier League table? Yes. Does it help that they have a very easy path to a Champions League final? Yes, absolutely. But losing to a championship side in the FA Cup quarterfinal, not a good look, especially on the heels of losing to a weaker Man City team at Wembley in a League Cup final. That to me is the most worrying part. Your 2 easiest chances to win a trophy this season thrown away. And the more realistic conversation that's being had right now is, can Arsenal win any trophies at all? Can they still win the Premier League with this momentum that Man City has? Can they still win the Champions League after the form we saw them in back-to-back win-or-go-home games? All very valid conversations and all very valid questions. And I'll give 2 very brief answers to those before we go and preview the match against Sporting. Number 1, in terms of the Premier League, not that it hasn't happened in the past, because it has very recently to this very team, but a lot needs to go wrong for them to lose their ground in the Premier League and to bottle the Premier League title at this point. So I would say that while that's the priority and that's very much the focus, we have a 9-point lead at the top of the table. If it were anything less than that, I would be freaking out as an Arsenal fan right now. But the fact that we have the 9-point lead, we could still lose to Man City or drop points at the Etihad and have enough of a gap between us and them that we could still go on and win the league. I'm feeling very confident in our ability to finish the job in the Premier League. When it comes to the Champions League, I think it's going to depend on Arteta's decisions with the starting 11. Now, there's obviously going to be less decisions to make than there were in the cup competitions, because you're not going to be rotating your goalie. You're not going to be rotating your midfield as heavily as you were in those lesser cup competitions. But I still think there's a formula for Arsenal to go and win the Champions League, but that formula can only be played out by a select group of individuals in that Arsenal starting 11. So it's not necessarily squad rotation that I'm worried about. I'm more so concerned with Arteta's ability to pick the right 11 when he has such a deep squad. You know, knock on wood, if we're able to get through the quarterfinal and onto the semifinal or onto a potential final in the Champions League, you're going to have a mostly healthy squad, as is going to be coming back. Odegaard has already come back. Rice, Saka, Gyökeres is healthy. Madueke is back. Nketiah, Timber, they'll be back as well. So with a fully healthy squad at his disposal and a potential European trophy on the line, is he going to be able to pick the right starting 11 to compete with the likes of a PSG or a Barcelona in a potential semifinal, or a Real Madrid, or whoever it may be? And I don't think I can answer that right now. After seeing the lineup decisions that he made in the League Cup final and then the FA Cup quarterfinal, I don't know that he has the ability to put whatever loyalty he has to Odegaard aside, or whatever he sees on that left side of the attack. I think lineup decisions can kill this team, and I don't think it's going to kill them in the Prem, just because we have such a huge lead at the top of the table. We can afford to drop points here and there down the stretch and rotate the squad if we feel as though we have the league won and we want to rest up our best possible 11 for a potential Champions League semifinal or final. That being said, I believe they can do it. I still think that Arsenal will win the Premier League, and I do think we're going to at least make it to the Champions League final. I don't know if I can trust us in another final after seeing the one that we played in this year, but I do think we can get to that point. It's just going to be a matter of making the right decisions, putting out the best possible 11 that you can, and competing with the likes of PSG, Bayern Munich, Real Madrid, whoever ends up getting there. To get there, though, they need to get through this quarterfinal, and it starts today in Portugal. Arsenal will be traveling to play away at Sporting Lisbon in the first leg of the Champions League quarterfinal. Let's preview the match. Let's talk about the starting 11. I'll give my prediction for this first leg. I'll give my prediction for the second leg, albeit probably very contingent on what happens in this first leg. And we'll talk about the outlook of Arsenal's Champions League hopes moving forward. First, the starting 11 for Arsenal. This is who I would start tonight against Sporting. Obviously, there are some injuries that we're still dealing with. We already have a couple confirmations of players that will not be traveling with the team. There are some question marks around some players who were in first team training but have picked up injuries recently and were not expected to return this early. But based on all the information that we have so far, the rumors about who's in and who's out, this is who I would start. David Raya, obviously back in goal. Thankfully, Kepa will never play another game for this Arsenal team. Then I would go Ben White, Gabriel, Saliba, and Calafiori as your back four. Midfield, I'd go Rice, Zubimendi, Odegaard. And then up front, I would go Madueke, Gyökeres, and Max Dauman. In terms of Ben White, I don't believe he deserves the start after what was an abysmal defensive performance against Southampton in the FA Cup tie. However, it's been all but confirmed that Jurrien Timber will not be available for today's match. So that leaves you pretty thin at right back. So you're kind of forced into a Ben White start unless you really want to shake things up and try and put a center back like Christian Mosquera at the right back position. But I think they're going to start Ben White, give him another opportunity to redeem himself after that FA Cup tie. And then Calafiori is due for a bounce back occasion. I think really tough international break for him with Italy missing out on yet another World Cup. And then he comes back, his first match back with Arsenal. Really tough FA Cup loss to Southampton that he was not necessarily at fault for, but he was on the pitch for that Southampton second goal that ended up winning the match for them. So I think the competitive spirit that he brings and the hunger that he brings on the pitch, I think he's due for a bit of a morality boost in terms of just something positive happening to his team while he's on the pitch. So I think I'd give him the start. In terms of that midfield, Rice and Zubimendi should be back, no problems. As for Odegaard, I thought he looked pretty good against Southampton. Obviously still working out some kinks and kind of shaking off the rust a little bit. He had a couple really good opportunities in the box that he just mishit, or, just a little bit of a lack of focus there. But I guess that's to be expected when you miss 2+ months with an injury and you've really been playing the entire season with one injury or another. If Eber Echezza were 100% healthy, granted, he was in first team training this week. He was pictured in first team training, but I don't think he's 100% healthy. He was not expected to be back until at least the Man City match in the Prem or beyond that. So the fact that he popped up in first team training this week, they're talking about him being likely for the Bournemouth match over the weekend. It's a little bit shocking. That being said, if he's available today and he's 100% fit to go, I'd start him over Odegaard. I'm thinking that he's not 100% and that this is a very expedited injury recovery that we're seeing from him to try and get back for this intense run-in of games. I think Odegaard can play the Eza role to like a 75% degree, which will probably be enough for this first leg. And then you go back to the Emirates for the second leg where Eza should be 100% healthy and he should get the start there. And then your front three, I'm starting Madueke off the left because Bukayo Saka is also one of the other players that is all but confirmed to not be available for today's match. Gyökeres, obviously, it's his former team. He's been in great scoring form for Arsenal recently. He's your best attacking option right now. It's a no-brainer that he's going to get the start. And then Max Dowman off the right. I think age, experience, seniority is all thrown out the window at this stage of the season. In back-to-back performances from him now, he's been your best player. His touches in the box, his positivity moving forward, his willingness to go for goal, the threat that he poses in attack as a 16-year-old, he's giving you 5 to 10 times the output that you would be getting from Gabriel Martinelli or Leandro Trossard. And those are two players that I love to see in the squad. But I think right now, comparatively speaking, Max Dowman is your best winger, and that includes Bukayo Saka this season. He's also proven that no moment is too big for him, so I wouldn't be concerned starting a 16-year-old in a Champions League quarterfinal if he's looked like your best player the last month. Now, what I think is more likely from Arteta is probably Trossard off the left, Madueke off the right, bring Dowman on as a sub if you really need a spark in the second half. But I'd start him. I really would. In terms of my prediction for the first leg, I'm going to go 1-1 draw. I know that there's immense pressure on Arsenal right now after back-to-back defeats in 2 different competitions that have slashed their quadruple hopes in half. There's an enormous pressure on their shoulders to win today just to get everybody feeling better about the club. I think a successful result for Arsenal today, though, is a draw. Sporting are undefeated at home in the Champions League this season. They also have a ton of momentum in the competition after having just erased a 3-0 deficit in the last round against Bodo. And although we have the squad depth, we're still very much hobbling into this match. We have a lot of injuries in the squad. There's a lot of question marks about the fitness of some of the players. And then obviously you're carrying the burden of the FA Cup defeat and the League Cup defeat. I think much like the situation against Leverkusen in the last round, a draw away from home will have you feeling like you're in the perfect position to go back to the Emirates next week with a much healthier squad and a much more confident squad, hopefully coming off of a weekend win in the Premier League. I think a draw today is a success. Now, I'm obviously hoping for a win. I'm expecting a win. But I think objectively speaking, I could see this one going the way of a 1-1 draw. So that's my prediction. And I'll leave you all with that for today on this big Champions League match day. We will be back tomorrow to recap the first leg of the Champions League quarterfinal between Arsenal and Sporting. Make sure to follow us on social media at The American Gooner. Make sure to subscribe, like the video, leave your comments and your thoughts down below. And if you're listening on Spotify, make sure to drop us a follow as well. Like I said, we will be back tomorrow. But until then, come on, you Gunners.